You're not separate from the version of you that has everything. You're entangled with it. And the field is waiting for a signal. That signal isn't just what you want, it's who you decide to be. There is a version of you that already lives, the life you're dreaming of. That version doesn't exist in theory, it exists in frequency, and through the mysterious mechanics of quantum entanglement, you are already linked to it, right now. Not tomorrow, not after you heal, not after you learn how to manifest. Right now. The question isn't whether your dream life is real. The question is, why haven't you tuned into it yet? If your life feels stuck, if your goals feel out of reach, it's not because they're far away. It's because your current identity is still entangled with a version of you that doubts, delays, and self-sabotages. But the moment you shift who you believe yourself to be, not in your thoughts but in your state, everything begins to rearrange. And here's the truth. Most people never learn how this works. They spend their lives trying to force change from the outside in, hustling, struggling, pushing. And even when they find the spiritual path, they still repeat the same mistake. They try to visualize their way into a new life instead of collapsing the identity that's anchoring them to the old one. That's why this video isn't just another explanation of the law of attraction. It's a deconstruction of reality and a guide to collapsing timelines. Because this is where two powerful concepts meet: quantum entanglement and quantum jumping. Entanglement explains why your energy affects matter, why your state influences your outcomes, and why even your subconscious programs aren't operating in isolation. You're broadcasting a signal into the quantum field at all times. That signal isn't your words, it's your vibration. It's the way your identity interacts with possibility. Quantum jumping, on the other hand, is often misunderstood. It's not magic. It's not escapism. It's a recalibration of identity that allows you to move between entangled realities. Realities where different versions of you already exist, waiting to be observed, activated, lived. And here's where it gets wild. You've already felt this. That moment when you made a decision and everything changed instantly, that was a jump. That sudden shift in perception where you saw yourself differently even just for a second, that was a timeline ripple. The gut feeling that you're meant for something more, that isn't fantasy. That's your future self, leaking through the cracks. In the quantum field, time isn't linear, it's layered, which means your future self can reach backward just as easily as you can reach forward. You are in a feedback loop with the version of you who already made it. And the connection is active. Right now. That's the code. That's the secret. The field doesn't need your effort. It needs your coherence. It needs your clarity. It needs your frequency to match what you're asking for, not with words, but with being. So in this video, we're going to dismantle everything you thought you knew about manifestation and walk step by step through the most powerful tool you've never fully understood. How quantum entanglement makes timeline jumping not only possible but inevitable. When you know how to use it. And no, this won't be about visualization, it won't be about wishing, hoping, or trying. This is about identity collapse, frequency alignment, reality as code. In the next section, I'll show you exactly how entanglement works, not just in subatomic particles but in your own life. We'll talk about the science behind it, but more importantly, I'll show you how this explains everything that has ever felt off about your reality. The version of you who has everything you want is already connected to you. Let's find out why you haven't jumped yet. Quantum entanglement is not just a theory. It's one of the most well-documented and least understood phenomena in modern physics. In simple terms, it means that two particles, once connected, remain linked in such a way that changing one instantly affects the other, no matter how far apart they are. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. But what no one talks about is what this means for you, for your consciousness, your identity, and your reality. Because if matter can behave like that, why not you? You are not a single particle in a void. You are a living, breathing field of consciousness. And just like those particles, you've been entangled, not only with other people, but with versions of yourself that exist across timelines. Versions that made different decisions, that followed different instincts, that healed instead of running, jumped instead of waiting, chose instead of doubting. You're not disconnected from them. You're vibrating in sync or out of sync with them. And that's what creates the version of you that the field reflects back as your life. But here's the glitch. Most people stay entangled with the version of themselves that is still surviving, still holding on, still afraid. Not because they want to, but because they were trained to, through repetition, through trauma, through identity loops so deep they no longer question them. And what you stay entangled with, you reinforce, you broadcast, you collapse into reality. So when people say, "I've tried to manifest but nothing works," the issue isn't their effort. It's that their signal, the deep unconscious one, is still broadcasting from the version of them that doesn't believe, that doesn't move, that doesn't act as if the new reality is already theirs. And here's where the field gets strict. The quantum field doesn't respond to want. It doesn't respond to begging. It doesn't even respond to visualization alone. It responds to frequency. And your frequency isn't determined by what you think about for 5 minutes a day. It's shaped by what you embody every moment. You are the observer, and the observer collapses the timeline. But what version of you is doing the observing? That's the question most people never ask. And it's why most people never jump. Because jumping isn't something you do, it's something you become. You can't quantum jump into your dream life if you're still acting from the version of you who doesn't feel worthy of it. You can't shift timelines by visualizing success while making decisions based on fear. The field doesn't care about your words, it cares about what you are entangled with, about what you reinforce through your behavior, your focus, your energy. And sometimes in the version of you who has what you want is actually pulling on the cord. You feel it. In flashes. In dreams. In moments where reality feels thin. You get glimpses of that other life. Not because you're imagining it, but because you're bleeding into it. It's bleeding into you. The connection is already active. The question is, how long will you keep ignoring it? In the next section, I'll show you exactly how to begin re-entangling your field, not just through belief or mindset, but through direct intentional identity collapse. That's how we jump. That's how we move. That's how we stop looping and start shifting. But before we go there, pause for a moment. If this message is resonating with you, that means you're already remembering something, not learning. Remembering. That's what happens when entanglement activates. You don't hear something new. You recognize something old. So if you felt something move in you while watching this, do me a favor. Hit subscribe. Not for me. For you. For the version of you who's ready to come online. And tell me something in the comments. What timeline are you tired of living in? Not the one you want, but the one you're ready to collapse. Name it. Witness it. That's the first step to letting go. Now, ready to meet the method? You've been entangled with the version of you that doubts, that delays, that compromises. But the version of you that has already made the leap? It's not out there, it's already observing. The only reason you haven't become it is because the identity you're currently collapsing keeps dragging you back into the same movie. Now it's time to rewrite the observer. You see, every moment you are choosing which version of you is behind your eyes. Most people don't realize this. They think they are their thoughts, their habits, their personality. But all of that is software. What most forget is that you are the one choosing the operating system, and you can reboot anytime. This is the key to quantum jumping, not becoming something new, but choosing to stop observing from the self that's entangled with limitation. The jump doesn't happen through action. It happens through collapse. So how do we do this? Let's start with what you're not going to do. You're not going to visualize, you're not going to chant, you're not going to close your eyes and pretend you're somewhere else. Not yet. That's what the old self tries to do. To escape. But jumping isn't escaping. It's reclaiming. We begin with one thing only: awareness. Start by asking yourself this question, right now, without flinching. Who is the version of me that's currently choosing this life? What are their beliefs, their fears, their core assumptions about reality? How do they speak to themselves when no one is listening? Really feel into it. You'll start to notice a pattern, a flavor of energy, a weight in your chest, or a tightness in your throat. That's not coincidence, that's the current observer's imprint. And you've been collapsing reality through it for years. Now here's the next question, and it may be the most important one you ever ask yourself. Am I willing to let that version of me die? Because that's what a jump really is. It's not a leap across timelines, it's a funeral. It's the quiet, conscious, sacred death of the self that can no longer carry your future. And most people aren't willing to let it go. Not because it's good, but because it's familiar. Familiar pain, familiar struggle, familiar identity. Even misery can feel like home when you've decorated it with enough reasons to stay. But now, in this moment, you have a choice. So here is the method. It doesn't have a fancy name. It's not a technique. It's a conscious realignment in 3 parts. Parte 1. Witness. Sit in absolute presence with the version of you that you're ready to collapse. Let them speak. Let them be seen, not judged, seen. Most timelines don't fade because they're resisted. They fade because they're outgrown with grace. Parte 2. Sever. This is where you shift the entanglement. Speak aloud, or internally, a simple truth. This is no longer who I am. I release this version. I collapse this observer. You'll feel resistance, that's natural. The old self fights for its life, but it only has power if you believe its voice is still yours. Part 3. Choose. Once the field is clear, choose the new identity. But don't just think it, embody it. Stand like them, breathe like them, decide from their frequency. Don't ask, what would the version of me who has everything do? Ask, what does that version no longer tolerate? And stop tolerating it now. These steps are not a one-time ritual. They are a way of being. Each day, each breath is a reinforcement of the new entanglement. And over time, not in years but in energetic cycles, the field will adjust. Because it has no choice. That's the rule of quantum mechanics. The observer collapses the wave into a particle. Reality conforms to the identity of the observer. But only when that identity is consistent. And here's the beauty of all this. The version of you who already lives the life you want is not a stranger. It's not some future avatar. It's a memory encoded in your energetic field. A path that's still active waiting for you to walk it. We'll talk about what happens after the jump. Because jumping is not the end. It's the beginning of recalibration. And without integration, even the most powerful leap will crumble under the weight of old programs trying to reclaim their place. But for now, just sit with this question. What parts of me am I still letting make decisions in my life even though I've outgrown them? And are they still entitled to speak for who I am? Take a breath, not just for your lungs, for your timeline. Because if you've made it this far in this video, you've already started something most people never dare to begin. You've questioned the authority of your own past. You've challenged the identity that's been holding the pen to your reality. That alone begins the shift. You might not feel like you've jumped yet, but you've already moved. Something cracked open, a thread loosened, a signal was sent, and that's how every quantum leap begins, not with fireworks, but with frequency, which brings us here. You did it. You collapsed the old self. You released the version of you that kept you looping. You stood inside a new identity, even if just for a few minutes. And in that moment, the field shifted. A new observer took command of your life. But now comes the part no one talks about, the recalibration. Because jumping doesn't just mean entering a new timeline, it means becoming stable in it. And like any system that's been running on the same frequency for years, when you suddenly install a new operating identity, there's going to be noise. You'll start to notice strange things. People might respond to you differently, not because you've said anything new, but because they feel it. Energy precedes language. Behavior shifts subtly. Some conversations will no longer resonate. Some relationships will shake. Not because you're rejecting them, but because they're tuned to the old version of you, the one you just let go. But the most unexpected part is this. The old timeline may try to pull you back, not as punishment, not as failure, but as a vibrational echo. You might suddenly feel overwhelmed, emotional, uncertain, not because you're wrong, but because you've stepped out of a familiar frequency and your nervous system is still catching up. That's normal. Imagine a radio finally changing the station after years of static. For a while, there will be overlap, mixed signals, ghost frequencies, and in that noise, the old identity might whisper, "See, nothing changed. You're still the same." This is the test, not of strength, of clarity. Because reality doesn't shift cleanly, it shifts quantumly, which means the moment you step into a new state, everything that doesn't match it begins to fall away. And what falls away, often, fights back before it goes. You'll be tempted to interpret discomfort as failure, but discomfort is just confirmation that the old code is breaking. And this is the moment most people undo their jump. They collapse back into the old observer, not because it was better, but because it was familiar. So how do you stay inside the new timeline? You don't force it. You don't fake it. You anchor it. Anchoring doesn't mean obsessively affirming. It doesn't mean pretending everything is fine when it's not. It means responding to life from the new identity, even when the world hasn't caught up yet. This is the real test of coherence. When the bank account still shows scarcity, but you respond with abundance. When the relationship still feels stuck, but you speak from wholeness. When fear knocks on the door, and you answer as your highest self, not your oldest one. Every time you choose the new observer, in thought, in feeling, in action, you stabilize the field. Because here's the thing about the quantum realm. It doesn't reward effort. It reflects consistency. The universe isn't testing you, it's listening to you. And every subtle vibration you emit tells it who you believe yourself to be. So instead of asking, "Why hasn't my new reality shown up yet?" ask, "What version of me have I been reinforcing today?" That's where the jump becomes real. Not in moments of inspiration, but in moments of doubt. When you choose again and again to be the one you decided to become. And yes, you will wobble. You will forget. You will collapse back into old patterns sometimes. But each time you remember, each time you breathe and return to the new identity, you retune the field. Eventually, the old frequencies lose strength. They fade, and what once felt like trying becomes natural, effortless, obvious. You're not faking it until you make it. You're feeling it until you stabilize it. There's a difference, and at some point, without even noticing, you'll look around and realize the external has changed. Not because you forced it, but because you became unshakable in your frequency. You stopped reacting from lack. You stopped negotiating with limitation. You stopped giving airtime to the self that never believed in you. And when that voice, no longer dominates the channel, reality has no choice but to update the script. So here's what I want you to sit with before we move on. What's one choice you can make today that only the version of you in the new timeline would make? Not a big leap. Just one choice, one shift, one aligned moment of coherence. Because that's all it takes to begin reinforcing the new field. In the next few minutes, we'll close the loop. We'll talk about how to live in sustained quantum awareness, where jumping isn't something you do, but something you become. We'll seal everything you've learned into a way of seeing, living, and transmitting that upgrades not just your life, but your timeline itself. And so it begins. Not the leap that already happened. Not the test. That was part of the noise. This is the moment where everything inside you slows, recalibrates, and settles. Where the new version of you becomes the only version that makes sense. Because something subtle happens when you choose coherence over chaos again and again. The new identity stops feeling like a mask. It stops feeling like a performance. And without noticing it, you've become the version you used to visualize. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped feeding the one who couldn't hold it. This is the real integration, where decisions feel quieter but deeper, where responses come from truth instead of protection, where you no longer debate with old thoughts because they don't belong to you anymore. They were echoes from a previous field, from a previous you, and they no longer survive here. This is the quantum made practical. Not philosophy, not poetry, but your life. You'll notice that old patterns stop activating you. You'll feel emotions arise and dissolve without needing to become your identity. You'll speak differently. You'll move differently, not because you're trying to act like someone new, but because you're no longer pretending to be someone you're not. And that's the full loop. The observer who used to collapse your reality has been replaced, not by magic, but by choice. Repetition, breath, awareness. And in doing so, the entire field around you, people, opportunities, coincidences, begins to arrange itself into new patterns, not because reality is rewarding you, but because reality is simply responding to the truth of who you are now. So what happens next? You live it. You walk. You wake. You feel. And each time life hands you contrast, as it will, you ask yourself one simple question. Which version of me is being invited right now? That's it. That's the code. That's the gate. You're not meant to live from control. You're meant to live from signal. And your signal becomes clearer with every aligned choice, every regulated breath, every moment of remembrance, because truthfully, you didn't jump into another timeline. You collapsed the illusion of separation between you and the version of you who was always waiting. That life was never out of reach. That self was never unreachable. The entanglement was always active. You just stopped ignoring it. So now the only thing left to do is live as if this is normal, because when it becomes normal, it becomes real. Your timeline doesn't upgrade through force. It upgrades through embodiment. Now breathe. Feel what's different in your body. Not what you hope, but what you already know. That's your signal. That's your anchor. That's your proof. And before you go, let me leave you with this. If this video found you at the right time, if it reminded you of something ancient inside you, then this is your sign to not let the algorithm decide when you remember again. Subscribe to this channel not because you were told to, but because something inside you wants to stay connected to this field, this resonance, this rhythm, this frequency that you now carry. And tell me in the comments, not just what changed, but what new reality you're ready to embody. Describe it, even in one sentence, not as a wish, but as a recognition. Let your words be the signal that tells the field, I'm already here. Because when you name the life you're now living, you activate it in others, and the field responds in kind. This is how we shift, together, one signal at a time.